Hello and welcome to the 2022 DEB mock examination paper, section C, higher level, and we're going to look at part A today. Question 16A. You're given some files on your computer and you're asked to do the following. Open the program question 16A.py from your device. One of the most powerful aspects of Python is its ability to read in data from external sources and perform complicated analysis on the data. You will find a file of a poem by Pierce Bysshe Shelley called shelley.txt in the same folder as your seed file. Using the .readlines function in Python, open Shelley text file, read the file into your program and then close the text file. Indicate that it has worked using an appropriate print statement. The output should look as follows. The poem has been read correctly by the program. Now, the very first thing to do is to open the file. So I'm going to go to my folder and I'm going to have this file open in the background. So it's open first of all. So the first thing you do is open the file. Then in Tani, I'm going to tell Tani what I want it to do. And remember, you have a referencing guide for Tani. So make sure and use it in your exam as well. If I have a little look at the referencing guide, over here, it's f.equals. So f is a variable. Dot equals, open the path address or close your bracket. So I'm going to use this and I'm just going to make it easy and I'm going to use the same variable name here, f. Obviously you can use whatever variable name you want, but I'm just going to keep it with the referencing guide because this is a little bit of an unusual question. I'm just going to stick with what we have here. So f equals open my path address, comma, my speech marks or close my bracket. So in Tani, that's where I'm going to begin. Now remember, I have my text file open. So I've gone to my folder and I've opened my text file and I have it open in the background. So now I'm going to go ahead with f equals, and I'm just using the same variable as the referencing guide. You can use whatever variable you want. And it's open. Open your two brackets. Your path is first. Well, my path in this case is just shelley.txt, comma, and I just want to read it in. If I just run that to make sure that I don't get, and I have got an error. So, so I just need to put, again, just go back to your reference guide and check. But what I was missing there was just my little strings around the shelley.txt, and you can see that there is your path. You will need to put strings around that in your path, so just maybe remember that. That's not on the guide, but you will need to do that in here, so just remember that. If I run it now, okay, I'm not getting an error, so that's good. I'm just going to clear my screen here at the bottom and just run. So that's running, so that's good. Now, you're told to use the read lines. So go back to your referencing guide again. And it says f.readlines. Remember, my f is my variable. So I'm using the same one. So I'm just going to go with it. f.readlines, and don't worry about the size. I'm just going to leave that blank. It'll just open it. f.readlines, open bracket, close bracket. And after I read in the lines, I also want to close it. So again, go back to my Python referencing guide. How do I close it? It's just f.close, open bracket, close bracket. And finally, I'm told to print it out if it's working. Print out a statement. And even if you couldn't open the file or it wouldn't work for you, you could certainly put in your print statement and get a mark here. So just looking at that print statement is what I'm looking for. So just go back over to my question. It says the poem has been read correctly by the program. So that's what I want to print out. Poem has been read correctly by the program. So you would type it in and just run it, and it's working. Now all of that is part A. So again, part I. So I just put in my hashtag answer I, and I'm just going to copy that to each of these lines. Now let's look at question number 2. It says modify the program to output the last line of the poem. When the program is run, the output may look as follows. So to output the last line, well, first thing we all know is that it has to be a print statement. The last line is, and then how do we get the last line of something? Well, if you treat your file that you're reading in almost like a list, and you're reading it in here, you're reading the lines in here. So if I was to give that a variable name, just call it lines equals f.readlines. And if I was to print lines, and the last line of everything is always the -1, and run that, the poem has been read incorrectly by the program. The last line of the poem is not may endure, but mutability. So if I open up Shelley, that is my last line there. So I'm missing some colons around it, just speech marks around it. So just to be really particular, I put speech marks there and comma like that, and run it. The last line is, and I have this, and just move that in, and that's perfect. The last line is not may endure, but mutability. So basically all that was a print statement, and just treat it like you would a list. And I gave this a variable name so that I could call on it in here, and then to get the last of everything is always to -1, and that's part 2. So I just put in my comment, and now let's have a look at part 3. Modify the program to count the number of lines, words and characters in the poem. Hint, use the dot split to create a list containing all the words from the different lines. When the program is run, the output may look as follows. The program has been read correctly. The last line is, there are 19 lines, 130 words and 700 characters. So there's quite a bit to this. We need to split it up. Modify the program to count the number of lines, the number of words and the number of characters in the poem. There's always other ways to do things. There's a suggested method here, but you don't have to use that hint if you don't want to. If you're happy enough to have your own method of doing it, that's fine. And I'm actually going to show you an alternative method than the one that's in the marking scheme. And you can have a look at the marking scheme and see which method you prefer. So I'm just going to go back to Tani. And I have my comment in here, answer to number 3 below. I'm going to start out with having a line count. So let's see, can we get the line count going? Because we want to count the lines, the words, and the characters. If I do a line count equals the length of the lines. And remember, lines is up here, reading in my lines. If I then print my line count, just to see if it's working, and run it. Sorry, I had saved over my file. Let me just run it again. So it's telling me there's 16 lines, and if I open up my notepad, I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So I'm immediately happy with my answer. And don't be afraid to check it during the exam as well. You know, you can open up your text file there and have a look at it. That's the lines. So I might just put in a little comment here, finding the number of lines. I just printed it there. You can do a full print statement at the end, but I like to just print it to see if it's working. If you wish, you can just comment that out, you know, afterwards. You're just checking your code as you're going along, basically. It's a nice little habit to get into. It means that if it's working, you'll have confirmation of it as you're coding. If I want to count, say, the words. Now, how do I know, well, what is a word? Words are separated by spaces. So from an algorithmic point of view, you might think, okay, well, if I find the number of spaces in a paragraph, do I have all the words? Well, you do if you add 1 to it, and that's your first word. So you have your first word, and then every other word has a space before it. You don't tend to have a space before the very first word in your text file, but everything else would. So that can be counted. If you count up your blanks, you know, you're counting your words essentially if you add 1 to your count. So let's set up a blanks. And you can set it equal to 0. And I'm going to just put in a comment here to word count below, just so that I know what I'm doing when I look back at my code, or when the examiner looks at your code. And if I put up in a little for loop for a character in paragraph, and remember, my paragraph is my entire thing here read in. So for every character in my paragraph, what do I want to do? Well, I want to see, is there any spaces in it? So if the character equals space, and I pressed the space bar there, hope that's obvious. You know, if you're looking for X or Y or Z or ABC, you'd put in ABC, but here I'm just looking for spaces. So just pop in my space, put in my colon at the end, and I'm going to say blanks plus equal 1. So I wanted to count all the spaces and then to increase my little count of my blanks then by 1. And then after I do that, I'm going to just set up my word count. So if I count all my blanks, well, what's my word count then? My word count, I'm just going to set up as a new variable. You don't have to, but just because I'm just trying to talk you through it. Word count is my blanks plus 1, and 1 being the first word in the paragraph. So I'm just writing out in plain English a little comment with my train of thought here, and I'm just going to print my word count down. Again, I like to just print it to see that it's working, and it's telling me 123 words, so I'm satisfied with that. I don't necessarily need to leave that print there, so I'm going to just comment it out. Just as I go along, it's nice to do it. Now I want to get to characters, so every single character in that piece of text. So if I say num car. So just set up some sort of a variable. Equals the len of my paragraph and I print that. So here, you know, in part 1, I got the length of the lines. And remember, this here is my lines was my read lines, and that breaks everything up into line by line. But down here, I'm getting the length of my paragraph, and that brings the entire thing in together. So let's run that. I get 706, so I'm quite happy that that seems to be working as well. Now, I'm not going to suggest you go over here and count every word, every character in that to see if it's 706. I'm happy enough that it's a large number and it looks right. Now I just need to put in a print statement for the whole lot, so I'm just going to comment out that one, and then I'm going to put them all together in a print statement. So print, and the number of lines is, comma, my line count, comma, the number of words is, comma, my word count, and the number of characters is, comma, numcar, and let's run it. So there's my print statement. So that's part 3. Now, I didn't use the suggested method that was given in the exam paper, and that's fine. You don't have to. If you've never seen it before, you're not comfortable using it, don't use it. Do something that you know how to do. And interestingly, the next part to this question says, the Shelley text file shows there are 16 lines, not 19, as indicated in part 3. So if you actually used the suggested split, it would tell you 19 lines. Now, I find it's a little bit misleading as an exam paper to do that, to be honest, to students, because the student could get hung up on it. Never mind. The thing about it is, you got 16 as your answer the first time. I did it using this method. So you actually have essentially answered part 3 and 4 together. And if you look at the marking scheme, it says, if I could just open the marking scheme for a moment, it says that students may answer them together and that that is perfectly acceptable. So if I just scroll down, I don't think the SEC would give something like this. So let's just look. There's a possible solution, and you can go and look at the other possible solution if you wish. And if I move on to part 4 here, it says that, it says students might answer part 3 and 4 together. If so, give marks for both. So by doing it this method, you've actually answered 3 and 4. If you see there's 10 marks, there's 15 marks. So you've actually got all the marks in one go. I couldn't see the SEC giving something that would have 2 different answers, 19 or 16, without kind of indicating at that level here that it could be one or the other. I know it's saying usually a sample run would be the answer. So I'm just, this is a mock paper and it's quite good just to show us that. However, we now have part 4 done, and I'm just going to move on to part 5. And in looking at part 5, I'm only going to do part of it. Again, I'm just looking at the difficulty level at Leaving Cert, at doing something like that in the time frame. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to find out if the word is in the text, but we're not going to break it down into what line it's on. there is a suggested solution on the marking scheme, and you can go and look at that if you wish, but I'm just going to answer, is it on the line or not, rather than this piece here, which line is it on. I'm just going to leave that off. I think it's a little bit too difficult. So let's go ahead and answer the question that I'm talking about, which is, to search the poem for a particular word and know its location. So what I'm suggesting is search the poem for a word. Is it there, yes or no? That's what I'm going to do. Getting the actual line number that it's on, I'm not going to concern you with that right now. If you want to see the solution, you can tip over to the marking scheme and have a look at how it's answered there. So let's go to Tani and just find out if the word is on the line or not, one or the other. It's there or it's not there. So part 4 then, or sorry, part 5, because we've done parts 3 and 4 together. Part 5. So I'm just going to start with a search word. You can set up whatever variable you want. Search for a word, right? So input from the user. Please enter a word you want to search for. Okay. So that'll take in input, and if the search word is in the paragraph, you want to print the word is found. Else you want to print word not found. Enter a word, so I'm going to search for clouds, and it's giving me an error. What's the error? Line 41 is EARCH. Let's run it again, just a typo. Searching for the word clouds, and the word is found. Now, I haven't found the line that it's on. If you wanted to go through it line by line, there are only 16 lines, you can do that. Or you can look at the stepping method that's in the marking scheme, which I find is quite difficult. So I'm just going to leave you with this quick search. Is it found, yes or no?